Can you close the door, no, please?
Let's go to the
יפה.
אני ישראל.
Just this. Hi, Moshe. There's room for you here if you like. Or
Wow.
this chair back there too.
I like that shirt.
They just uncovered more ancient artifacts.
Okay, but not for right now. We're going to start class now. Okay, guys? The class on Tefillah, Wednesday morning, last week, actually, still on the board. We talked about different approaches to Tefillah. And after class, Reuben came over to me and gave me a suggestion, which I've been mulling over in my mind and playing with for a little bit. And I like what he did with it. So I want to share it with you. Just to review, we spoke about the different approaches to God as like a subject to the king, or as a subservient a worker or servant to the master, as a lover, partner who's connected emotionally, and about someone who sort of melts into a unity, which is greater than himself. And ultimately, we said the fifth stage, perhaps the first, is when you feel like you are being a vehicle to godliness in the world. You're a vessel for God to express Himself in the world. And we also talked about perhaps these being called different types of nullification, nullifying yourself. The bottom line is as follows. And perhaps the following diagram can help us try to imagine what that means and really get to the heart of what we're doing when we're praying. So this is okay, this is me, or you, or this is where we are, and we have our lives, and we concerned with ourselves and with taking care of ourselves, and we know we have our identity, we have our life, our emotions, our thoughts, but the point of prayer is actually to go out of ourselves. It's to connect to God. Okay, so God's got to be somewhere over here, right? And the question of how you draw the arrows. But the concept is, and I think Asher mentioned a few times that I taught a very simple meditation. I hope after this class, the second part of this class is going to be practical. We're going to try to actually do a little guided imagery. The concept is that when you pray, the most basic kavanah is, I am who I am, and God is who He is, and you can go on to no end about how He's so great, and He's so powerful, and how He's so knowing and loving and saving, and me, I have my foibles, and I'm just little small me, and then when I'm about to pray, so I'm going to make a connection between these two poles. Okay, maybe I'll make two. As God, it's a little bigger, as you can say. Of course, we're very different in kind, but so godliness is somewhere up here, and we're down there. And so, the question is, how do we connect? So, I looked it up. I think it's called Quadrant Analysis. What Reuben showed me is that we're gonna talk about moving outside of yourself. You can move in two directions. I think this is called the x-axis?
Yes.
It's called y-axis?
Yes.
I remember back, I once learned geometry and everything. So what are these axes? So it's these types of approaches to God, and the y-axis is going to be those types of approaches to God. And if we talk about at the beginning, you have your sense of importance, we said. You're the one who's important. Importance. Or I'll put it my importance. And then, as you go, this is closer to, what's important is him. His importance. The more you bring yourself to think about I'm not really all that's important, like we talked about.
Nullification of the self.
First, nullification of importance. We're going to get to nullification of the self as well, and that's a sense of, the identity. Also, I think that this identity, and really when you nullify yourself and you become identified with him, right? This is the unity we talked about over here. So you're part of his identity. So I'll just write his identity or his unity, either way. But it's a scale. It's a scale of trying to, in your consciousness, being more and more aware or attuned to being a separate individual me, or realizing that, okay, I'm here, but there's also God here, and I'm not most important in this relationship. So much so that it's all about him or his unity, and I sort of am swallowed up in that. Okay, you wanted to say something, though?
I was going to say, are we not diminishing his I guess, power by trying to delve into his identity and and all these kinds of things, trying to personify him? But then I put my finger down to you and talk about it's more about the relationship. We're not trying to define him.
It's a good question, and we're going to get back to it. If God is up here and he remains there, and we never have any contact with him, I think that is maybe minimizing him more than, as we're going to see. I think the goal is going to be to get him to expand and maybe include us within his existence. We're not minimizing him. As a matter of fact, we're not putting him in the corner like many people do. They say, leave God in the church or in synagogue. The rest of my life I can go and do whatever I want, but as long as I go to church on Sunday, I'm okay, right? So that's minimum. Or just saying that I'm gonna eat kosher when I get home, but when I'm out at work, I don't wear my kippah, and I don't, I'm a Jew. It's compartmentalizing your Judaism. What we're talking about now is exactly the opposite. It's expanding your awareness and therefore God's presence in the world more so, because you're bringing him into your life.
But he has no potential, so there's nothing that we can do to bring ourselves closer. He is already the essence of everything.
Yeah, I hear that. So usually we speak about, of course, God is everything, God is everywhere, and he's all powerful. Usually we speak about, is that revealed though? Is that hidden or revealed? He's in the world, but it's up to us to reveal him and to, whether we like it or not, God runs everything and he gives us life. But it's up to us to call it out in his name, as it says in the sources, right? To make ourselves aware of it and to live our lives in connection to him. And that it doesn't change him, but it changes how revealed he is in our lives. Okay, is that clear? So far, so good. The other axis, of course, this leaves us with the top of the line. We speak about here. We're talking about my will. I do whatever I feel like. If God doesn't exist, but the more I bring him into my life, the question becomes to do his will. I want to commit to doing his will, and then be totally committed. And then also we speak about.
Sorry, is that when you become a vehicle for God?
We'll get to that in a minute. My emotions, my emotional world is all about myself, right? But when you connect to Hashem, like we said last week, connecting to any other, you start to feel it's an emotional connection. It's hard to speak about his emotions.
I talk about his hands and his arms and everything.
That's right, we might as well. So, what that means is though that you have an emotional relationship, and you feel like we had over here, that you're so connected to God, so that you're sort of happy when He's happy, or you feel the love, you feel the reverence, because you feel maybe not His emotions, but you feel emotionally connected to Him. So this is perhaps the y-axis is one of connecting, feeling connected. Whereas this is more of a importance and identity axis. Okay, so far so good. Now, if I can just erase this for a moment, our goal is to. You guys, you've seen graphs before, so you know how it works. Our goal is to move from this point, and the idea of an XY graph is it shows you the relationships between the movements, right? You can be over here, and you can be over here, and you can be over here, and different places, right? If you can be a person who gets very emotional and really love God, but in the end of the day, it's still part of your enjoyment. It's really, you're not really worshiping God, you're worshiping yourself, because you want to feel spiritual, you want to feel happy, you want to feel, so you feel very emotional. It's like it's almost self-serving, right? And the goal is to get further out in not being about you. And the way to do that is to have that emotional world, but as service to Him.
What about fear?
Also,
You serve Him out of fear.
so the best way to and you could have the opposite too. You could have someone who just nullifies himself. Right? We talked last week about the Buddhists and the Eastern religions who just try to melt into his identity, but then there's not much there in terms of love, in terms of fear. It's just almost no feeling on the subject, the person doesn't have any and you're not doing anything. You're not doing his will versus your will. There's just no will. There's just so that's like flat line, only going in the x-axis and not moving anywhere in the y-axis. So we need to move ultimately if we want to get here. Right? We need to move ahead in both directions, in both movements. So let me just stop here for a second and summarize. I think the most important principle we've set up till now is that Tefillah is movement from our sense of self to connecting to God, and that experience can be done in many different ways. And now let's try to analyze it and try to take these same approaches and see how they fit into our chart. Okay. So the closest, the smallest the beginning, right? You could obviously, go in this direction or that direction, but the most minimal movement that you can move outward of yourself to take into account that you are not just by yourself, that you're actually moving towards God, is the first box over there on the left, and that is, that you basically accept God's will, that you are the subject. And accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, as we described. The very recognition that you're going beyond, you're going onto the graph, you're going onto the playing field. Okay, you're gonna. That's the very beginning of every prayer. Is okay. I'm moving outside of myself, somewhat, and I'm accepting that other than my will, I'm going to do His will, and other than my own self, I'm realizing that there's God there as well. So you're moving on to this whole, I would say, it's the playing field of God. Let's move ahead. This quadrant, all right, it's a quadrant analysis. So there's 4 quadrants, just like there's 4 here. So I was thinking that perhaps here, of course, as you move ahead to being one with him and his unity, so we're going to be talking about losing your sense of identity and being swallowed up in his identity, and we call this unity, right? And this box is going to be, no, sorry, I'm confusing. No, that's right. This is, sorry. That's
Wait,
over here.
Is it okay
That
if you
makes
write
sense.
it in the bottom, or why
No,
is it?
so
why is it-
I'm going to explain why. So when you move, what I'm looking for is this one first, right?
Okay.
This one is the being subordinate. The more you are willing to realize that it's not all about you, and it's you want to serve God. You're totally right. You're committed with all your heart and soul. You're going to be moving along this axis of from my importance to his importance. And at the same time, you're going to have here this idea of emotional connectedness, right? So you're so connected to him that you're like emotionally connected. So the way it works is it's not one or the other. What I liked about this when I was thinking about it after moving, it pushed me to think about this type of structure. So usually we say that the farther out you are towards the other side, that's going to be the best, right? So here, like, this is a big smile. Here, this is, it's not necessarily bad, but it's not ideally where you want to be. You want to be, not just say, oh, I accept God intellectually, and I know that he's there, but you want to have that expressed in a deeper way, either by feeling, emotionally connected, or feeling more and more committed to his service. And so you could put a smiley face like this. Right? It's not necessarily bad or good, but it's not the ideal. The ideal is you reaching the highest connection that you can have to God is to be united. And then, of course, you can't forget, we said perhaps the highest ideal is when you recognize that you are a vehicle of God within the world. You're still here on the playing chart, but you're sort of expressing your identity as part of God, expressing being a vessel of God, expressing that in life. So what I've been showing you up till now really is the direction of moving out from yourself and yearning towards godliness. And so you're changing yourself, you're changing your identity, you're changing your sense of feelings, how you feel towards God, more and more towards being not just a speck of dust in the wind, but actually connecting to something greater than you, something larger than you, being more and more godly in your life.
What's that circle on the very top right?
That represents God. Or godliness in the world. As I said, you know what I believe the ultimate goal is? So this is perhaps connecting to God, right? This is the arrow of. Now, when you pray, I'll speak a little bit more about this arrow, and ultimately you don't move from one box to the next box. Those when you open up your phone, sometimes you have to do. You move from here to here, and you make a code. Right? Again, so as everybody does a little bit differently. So you move between these different feelings in different directions. Sometimes you go to the right and then to the left, and then you go to the left, so to the right.
What you're saying, Rav, is my code should always start here at the bottom and always end up at the top.
According to this, yeah, but that's the direction. But it's really you're moving between these different emotions, and we're going to see how that's done in the prayer as well. But to give a more organic description of this. It's more like when you're moving out from here, you're creating a ripple of you're expanding your consciousness more and more. You get a little bit more, right? This is all in the when you expand who you are to include ultimately you're reaching and even beyond reaching into being aware, so that it's not at the same time you feel a little bit like a subordinate and you're trying to do God's will and you want to just
Do your job, I guess.
do your job in the best way possible. You're so committed. At the beginning, it's just to do your job, and then you move from there. You expand to doing your job, b'chol levcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol modecha, as we said, with all your heart, mind, and soul. At the same time, though, you're feeling the love of God. So you have, right, sort of a whole path, a whole how do I call it? A whole a movement of that includes both. It includes both of those elements. As you expand your consciousness and your connectedness to God, you can get close in both of the ways at the same time. And the further out you go, you're more and more aware of God being all there is, and being connected to Him, and even melting your own identity is so much committed. It's so connected to Him that you're so far away from where you were. You're over here, and you're really totally devoted to God, connected to God. You're feeling the emotions of love and fear and just totally subsumed within God. And that's the feelings over here. So this is the direction I think that you want to try to develop in prayer. To sometimes you focus on one quadrant, sometimes on the other quadrant, and ultimately, slowly, you're pushing the envelope, as they say, to use another expression. Okay, question. Someone wanted to speak.
So we can only move closer through prayer.
That's what we're describing right now. I believe that also your actions, doing the mitzvot, clearly you're showing that you're submitting your will instead of sleeping in bed like you want to because it's cold in the morning. You get up, you force yourself because you know it's His will, right? You'd rather sit on the beach, maybe drinking a pina colada. Instead, you come to the Beit Midrash and you study Torah. So of course you're submitting your will to His, but beyond that, maybe you start to connect to the prayers that you say. You understand what you're saying in prayers, and you're speaking about how singing to God and loving Him, and
is this accelerated by a minion?
That's the theory. That's the theory that prayers are better when you do it together with everybody. You can imagine if you have a,
If you're on
If
your
you have
own
a-
personal journey to
right?
find
If
God.
I take the three markers at once and we all go up together, right? It's going to be a much more powerful experience if you have many people together.
But it's a solo quest of the nullification of the self and this unity.
Sure. We all start from our individual identities, and there's some people that are communists and think only about the community, and their sense of self sort of disappears. But most of us have I think a healthy sense of self, and that's where it starts. But connecting to others on your journey, for sure, I think is the principle that it's helpful. Yeah.
I love the ripple analogy that you did, and each ripple is growing. Isn't there a concept that one mitzvah leads to the next mitzvah, which leads to the next mitzvah?
Nice. That's more in terms of a practical, right? Specific acts.
What's
I'm one of their leads.
Right. Maybe that could be connected. Sure. Other comments, questions? Now I want to explain to you a concept that many people don't understand, but it's central to the prayer. For some reason, the rabbis, when they devised the text of the prayers for us, at one point there was no text, and they gave us many themes that we should be saying in our prayers. Okay, God is great. God, I need wisdom. I need healing. Rebuild the temple. All those different things are elements. What's the structure that the rabbis used? The structure they used is said that we're going to have 19 blessings. What's a blessing? What does blessing mean? So it's a longer class that we don't have time for right now. But what I believe the key is for you to understand that everything we've been saying up till now is the arrow's been going in one direction. As a matter of fact, many times when we pray, what we're trying to do is to bring godliness down into our lives.
Mhm.
And then we're going to have the ripples in the opposite direction. Bringing more and more godliness into our lives, all the way, as I drew originally with even including our sense of self. So it's drawing down godliness into our world instead of bringing ourselves out into his sense of unity, or nullifying ourselves in him. And ultimately, who asked me about where do I put the being an agent or being the vehicle of God? Perhaps it's over here. It's right back to where we started. You still have a sense of self, but it's subsumed. It's a self which represents God, which expresses godliness in the world. That's ultimately the goal.
You originally put it in the top right.
So, okay, both of these, yeah. So these can be. It depends on which way the arrow is going, right? Ultimately, we use both directions in our prayer. It's drown godliness into our life, or going outside of ourselves towards connecting to God.
Saying it's
In the end of the day, it's both. Yeah. There's both movements within the.
So we can meet in the middle.
The movements of prayer, right? Meeting in the middle, not exactly the same. No. In the end, ultimately, godliness is of course much bigger than us, and is infinite, and the connection is not a connection of equals. And so meeting in the middle sounds like, okay, well, we'll go halfway. No. It's all encompassing. Religious life is totally one of connection, of dedication, one of that consciousness infusing your life. Whether you're infusing your life, you manage to bring it down into your daily activities, into where you usually are. You're just doing, everything, but with a different consciousness. Or you put it over here in the chart. In the end of the day, the point is that you're living as a vehicle of godliness in the world. That's the goal. So it can work both ways in the chart, over here or over here. And it's all a question of what you're doing. Are you going outside of yourself to try to connect to God? Or are you bringing godliness into the world? For example, I would say mitzvot that you actually do in your daily life. So you're actually trying to you're wrapping the name of God in the tefillah, you're wrapping them on your hand. You're bringing God down to be close to you. So when you pray, you're closing your eyes. You say Shema Yisrael, you cover your eyes. You're saying, I'm going beyond myself and beyond my regular world to connect to God, who is beyond. Other questions?
Yeah, what you just said, why do we cover our eyes instead of just closing them?
We spoke about it the other day, and I think it must be a different class. The simple answer is it's a technique for aiding concentration.
Okay.
You're not distracted if if your eyes are closed, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of different explanations relating to what we said just now. What I'd like to do with the remaining 5 minutes is to practice. Okay, and usually what we do is we close our eyes when we say the Shema, and because we can't always see God's unity. It's a mess, but you can't always see God's unity in this world, and that movement of covering our eyes, it says, even though I can't see it expressed in this world, sometimes we don't see God in the world, we just see trees and chemical reactions and money and sex and all sorts of just mundane materialistic things. It's a material world. Somebody said that, saying about that. I'm a material girl. Right, so some people are
living in a material world.
So that's on the face of it. So when we close our eyes and we cover our eyes, we're saying that even though we can't see it in this world, we are stating our affirmation of our faith. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one meaning God is is everywhere. God is in everything, and we can't see it. But then, ultimately, we pray to overcome that, and that's why the sages added in. It doesn't say it in the Torah. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Olam Va'ed. And all those words. What's the key word that I just taught you about? Baruch. Baruch is when the godliness does reveal itself in the world. When God's blessing appears in the world. And Shem, the name of God. It's also, your name is how you present to others. Kavod, we talk about the Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory, which represent God in this world. Malchuto, Malchut, some people might have heard of the Sfirot. It's the 10th, the lowest of Sfirot. It's where God shows his kingdom, his reign in the world. So all of those, that verse, the verse that we add into the Shema is sort of like the counteract, the closing our eyes and say, well, okay, we believe that God is one and everything is God, godliness is everywhere, but I can't see it right now. And when we say Baruch Shem Kol Malchuto Olam Va'ed, we're sort of praying that I want this to be revealed. I want the ripples to come down and fill our lives. And then we continue until, let's just, let's take a look at the Shema Yisrael for a moment. So everybody, please close your eyes.
With our hand over.
You could put your hand over. That's a lovely technique. I think that's a good idea. And we slowly start to think about, as I said, we always start about ourselves. We all have to start from where we are. Yeah, I know it's a little bit strange to be closing your eyes in the middle of the day, in the middle of class. And if you're going to fall asleep, it's okay, fall asleep. It's only going to be under 5 minutes. So we're closing our eyes and we are feeling ourselves. So sit comfortably, feel your tush against the seat, right? Feel your arms and legs and just sort of stretch them out a little bit and feel comfortable. Take a deep breath. In and out. And then take another deep breath. In and out. And just be present in where you are. And who you are. If you want, you can say your name to yourself. You can notice where you are. You're sitting down in a room. In Yerushalayim. I, Menachem Weinberg. Don't say my name. Okay. Now we're going to start to think about God a little bit. So, Shema, listen, I'm going to say to Menachem. Listen, Menachem. I'm saying it under my breath, in my own mind. I'm going to be thinking about changing my consciousness, going outside of myself. I'm going to say, Shema. Israel is a collective name for all of us. Shema Israel. Hashem Elokeinu. God exists. God is my God. God is our God. If you remember on the chart, it's the first quadrant, the closest to the XY axis. Okay, I'm being aware, being conscious of God's existing in the world. And I'm connecting to that godliness in the world. The very fact that it exists. He is like the king and I am his subject. We're going to take that thought, give it a few seconds, then we're going to expand it. So we're thinking about God being the king. I accept him as the king. Hashem Elokeinu. And we're going to go straight, continue the arrow straight as we saw on the board, to recognize that God is a unity. Everything really is part of God. Me too. Hashem Echad. If I can't see it with my eyes, I can see it with my eyes closed. That ultimately, godliness is everywhere. God created everything. Nothing would exist if God didn't exist. Hashem Echad. Amen. Now we're going to pray for that godliness to be revealed in our world. I suggest you keep your eyes closed still, even though when you say Shema, you can already open them. For this exercise, please keep your eyes closed. And as we explained, we want that unity of God to be manifest in the world. Baruch. That blessing is going to devolve on ourselves, on our world. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. And one expression of that godliness that's revealed in our worlds is going to be Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. You should love God. Try to conjure feelings of love for God who is with you. He's in our world. I have a sense of awe of him, but I also have an attraction to him. And he's with us at all times, right now. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. You should love God. Feeling that love that can translate into commitment. I am willing, it's an expression of that love and that connectedness to him. I am committed to serving him with all my heart, with all my soul, and with all my might, everything that I am. Amen. Amen. You can open your eyes. And just showed you how we basically went through what was the direction we went? We started off here in the first quadrant,
We
right?
went directly proportional.
And then we went to speak about God's unity, Hashem Echad. And then we went to here and talked about our love of God, the Avta. And then we went to here and said we're committed to him. It's all about him and serving him. And so
Where did we end up?
I'm not going to give you any hints, but if you want to get into my cell phone, that's the direction that you need to do. Right? You need to do that code. Okay, it's this way and that way and that way. Okay.
So no hints and then show us.
I don't have that kind of code on my phone. I'm just joking.
So sometimes we should
covering
love
it.
in
He's covering
Hasidic and
himself.
sometimes we should love in Litvak.
That's right. There's many different ways of praying, but you can go from one to the other. I just happened to use. I was using the first two verses of Shema to show you these four concepts. They're all there. We didn't continue to ultimately expressing that in our lives. I believe that the continuation is you have to study Torah. You have to put on the tefillin and have the mezuzah on your doorways, which is having the godliness within your world of action. Those are all actions. Those are things you do, that we do. We have to, mitzvot that we do, Torah, tefillin. And what do we say? The tefillin is like wearing God upon you, so you have the name of God in your life. So that's like a continuation of that. But I want to make sure you have time to ask questions and then have a
Where did
break.
we just end up?
I always would love to end up with the starred section, which could either be here or over here, and that's feeling that you are an agent, an instrument in God's hands. You're an expression of godliness in the world. I think that's our ideal goal. Okay. Other questions? Thanks for trusting me, closing your eyes, going with me on this
And I hope you went along
experiment. On the video, there are 4 people listening. Hope at home it worked for you
That's 4
over the airwaves. But we're going to stop here and let you guys have a break before the next class. Great job.